Now, I've been very lucky over the last few years to interview the biggest names in WWE, up and down the roster, most of the WWE superstars I've chatted to. And I say this with all sincerity, I can't remember being as excited as I am to chat to my guest this week on Gorilla Position. He is a host for 95.5 PLJ here in New York. He does the breakfast show, but also he was a host and interviewer for WWE, or WWF as it was back in the day, during the New Generation era. I'm, of course, talking about the man, the legend, Todd Pettengill.
You're very kind.
How are you?
I'm not sure you should be as excited, but
well, I've got to say, in a strange way, you're a very big part of my childhood. You know, I watched a lot of you on TV back in the day.
Right.
So it's an absolute honor to meet you today.
Well, it's amazing. It's great to meet you, too. I'm glad we could schedule this, and it was nice of you to come all the way over to New York to do this interview.
I came just for you, Todd.
I
just
bet
for
you did.
And I'm loving the studios here. Great setup.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So let's go back to the beginning, if you don't mind. I read that you started in radio, the media industry, when you were very young, like 13. Is that right?
That is right.
How did you make that break?
Well, my mom just wanted me to have a job, and at 13, apparently it was important that I start to work right away. I thought it might have been a little bit early, but she knew a guy at a local radio station where I grew up in upstate New York, and I went over and I fell in love with it. And, they paid me in records because I was too young to earn money. So back then we had records, and that's how I got paid. I wasn't even old enough to have working papers yet. And my voice changed at a very young age, so I had a deeper voice. So when people listened, they always thought I was older. And when they'd come to the radio station or something to meet me, they were like, you're a kid. I would ride my bike over to the radio station after school and work. And then, my dad would pick me up because it was dark. We'd put the bike in the back and go home. And that's how it started. And that was many, many years ago. And, I found a love. I think once you find something you really love to do, they always say you're not working a day in your life if you love it, right?
Yeah.
And that's how it started at 13.
And so why that jump into radio? What was it about being a host did you kind of gravitate towards?
I think I was always the class clown.
Okay.
I was always goofing up and making people laugh, and my mother thought it was either, try to do something with that energy or wind up in jail one day. It was, two very different directions, but similar if you know anything about radio. We call it the island of misfit toys. But it was just a way, I think, to express that sort of comedy and energy that I've always enjoyed. And man, after a while, they pay you to do it, which is even cooler.
It's amazing. And so how were you at school? You mentioned being the class clown.
Yeah, it wasn't good.
You didn't care about education?
It's not that I didn't care. I wasn't great at it.
No,
books,
I'm the same.
I just never had that thirst for knowledge.
Yeah.
Practical knowledge, yes. Street smarts, yes. But, in school, it was just, I think I was always cutting up and doing stuff because I was just bored, man. I was just like, well, I'm not really paying attention. I got B's, B's and C's.
Okay.
So, but I never had that thirst to say, man, college, I can't wait. I just couldn't wait to work full time. So right out of high school, I worked full time in radio.
And was there a radio station at the school at all?
There was a radio television station at the school, so I got that exposure. But I was actually working on commercial radio, broadcast radio at 13.
It's amazing.
So it was cool.
Can you remember your first ever live show on radio?
I do.
And how did you feel?
I do. I was doing a noon news report, and I had to read the obituaries.
Oh.
So it was a small town radio station, so everyone would listen at noon to see who passed away. And there was a lot of pressure. And there were things that I had no idea, like words of one of the funeral parlors I'll never forget was called Gujalik Pamakai. Only when I said it, it obviously didn't resemble that at all. I was 13. I didn't know anything.
No, of course not.
But that was my very first time on the air.
So you're the class clown, you like doing comedy and being funny, and you end up doing the obituaries.
Exactly.
And so then how did your career progress from there? So you're 13, you're doing live radio. How did you sort of build up your career? And then obviously eventually we'll talk about you jumping ship to WWF.
Yep.
So how did the next kind of few years pan out for
High
you?
school was great because I had my own radio show. So I could mention the girls. Hey, I'll mention you on my radio show.
Did that help with the women?
It definitely didn't hurt. Yeah, definitely
awesome.
Didn't hurt. So I did that until I graduated high school. And then Albany, which is the state capital of New York, was about 40 minutes away from where I grew up. And that was the big time, for somebody who lived in a small town in New York. To try to get to Albany, which is the state capital, was a big deal. And I was lucky enough to get a job at WFLY, Fly 92, in Albany, right out of high school. and eventually went on to do the morning show there, and stayed for about 7 years. And in 91, had the opportunity to come to New York, interviewed in New York, which is the biggest media market in the country. And it's been a great ride. I mean, I've been here almost 25 years.
Wow.
So it just was a natural sort of progression, and radio is all I've ever done, radio and television. I did some local TV when I was in Albany, and then here in New York did some, I guess you would call it local TV, but it's still on a national scale. And then that sort of brings us to the WWF days, when Vince McMahon, who was listening to the radio show, just called and said, "Hey, you're kind of funny. You're kind of a weird guy. How do you think about coming up here and maybe having an interview?" I said, "Well, I really don't know anything about wrestling." He said, "Perfect. I want somebody with an outside point of view, who doesn't bring any sort of misconceptions to it." And, I said, "Sure, that sounds great."
And so, talk me through that process. You get a call. Did you even know who Vince was?
I did. Of course, I know the name.
You knew who he was.
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, I watched growing up here and there, but I was never a hardcore fan. I remember Vince in his powder blue tuxedo, with the stick microphone. And, so I did catch it in Gorilla Monsoon and some of the bigger names.
You obviously know who Hulk Hogan was.
Definitely.
And, of course.
Yeah, but not, a true hardcore fan. I watch it in passing.
And so you get the call from Vince. What was that process going up to presumably Stanford to have your first interview? How did that process all go?
Well, it was amazing because first I met with Linda McMahon, who really was she was doing the business day to day.
Yeah.
So I had a nice meeting with Linda, and then she said, "All right, well, Vince would like to see you in one of the studios." So I went into a studio, and here's Vince, not quite as big as he is now, but he was still a big, intimidating figure.
Yeah.
And he threw me a bottle of water, and he said, "Sell it to me." So I did. I mean, I can talk about anything. I said, "This is the most unbelievable water. It's fresh. It'll soothe you. You can pour it on your feet if you're in the desert." Now, if you're in the desert, you might want to read it. So I went through this whole thing and crazy, and he goes, "That's unbelievable. Let's try this." And that's how it started.
What a great story.
Is that great?
You sold Vince McMahon a bottle of water and got the job.
And it almost didn't happen. Here's a story that I've never told publicly.
Give us this exclusive.
During the interview process, I thought Vince had left the building. So I went to use the bathroom. I made sure I turned my mic off, which is one of the cardinal sins that people commit, because the audio guys are always rolling. So I turned my mic off. I went to the bathroom, and I was going to the bathroom, and there was a fella in the stall who had clearly been doing some work, and it was not a pleasant odor.
Okay.
So I, being me, said, "Hey, how about a courtesy flush?" And I hear this laugh, and it was Vince.
No.
Yeah. So I'm like, amazing. Well, I didn't get this job. And he goes, "That's hysterical. Now I've got to hire you." And I've never told that story publicly.
That is a superb story.
Is that funny?
I love that you just told me that. That's amazing. So you cracked that joke. It was to Vince McMahon. You get the job. First day on the job. What was what were your duties day to day? Because you were a host of various shows. You were obviously an interviewer as well.
Yep.
How did you sort of get the ball rolling?
Well, keep in mind, I was always doing the radio. I never did that full time. So I was doing this show constantly while doing that.
Wow.
So I would go to Stanford 2 or 3 times a week. My very first pay-per-view, I was wearing a toga at Caesar's Palace.
Wrestlemania 9 was your first show.
That's where I broke in.
You and Jim Ross.
That's right.
Wow.
In our togas.
What a big show to kick off with.
Huge.
So, from your point of view, from a sort of personal experience, what is the WrestleMania experience like? It's obviously grown and grown to something even bigger now.
Yeah.
But even back then, Caesar's Palace, Las Vegas, it was a huge deal in '93, was that?
Yeah, and it was Hogan and Roddy Piper and Yokozuna and, those guys. And it was the pageantry that surrounds it.
Yeah.
And the number of people that it takes to pull off something like that was just mind-boggling to me. It's really like doing a football game, a baseball game in America where it's, 40 cameras and sound trucks and, producers in your ear. And it's a major production. And the talent was just, those guys were just amazing to work with.
Was it overwhelming for you? Because you come from a predominantly radio background, you then get thrown into Caesar's Palace, big, I guess at that point, one of their biggest shows ever, WrestleMania 9. Were you nervous on that day?
I think it was perfect for me because with radio, it's always live. You don't get a second chance, you know? So I was so used to being able to time things out and throw to packages and do that stuff live. And I think that's what they sort of liked about me. I just never shut up until the time hit zero. You have a producer talking in your ear, and you're doing your rap, and they'll say, all right, 30 seconds. And then, something happened with the package you got to fill. So go on. I get nervous energy, but not nerves.
Yeah.
There is a difference. You know, nervous energy makes you feel good and sort of pumps you up and gets you ready. So I felt that. I felt a little bit nervous in that I wasn't 100% comfortable with the content because I was very new at it.
Yeah, of course.
You know, I was still learning the guys, and I was still learning, you know, their timing and tempo. So I think there was some nerves that way, but the performance part of it, the broadcasting part of it, I was cool with. I felt really at home. And the producers are top notch there. The segment producers are great, and you know, the director's just absolutely great to work with.
It's an amazing production, isn't it?
It really is.
And can you remember sort of back in those days, can you remember anyone specifically who took you under their wing, helped you out when you first started in WWF?
You know, Kevin Dunn, who's the executive producer there, was just absolutely amazing to me. Really, really great. But on the talent side, I mean, Gorilla Monsoon and I were very good friends. The Macho Man, Randy Savage, kind of, you know, when we did a show together, Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man. There was so many guys that, you know, I mean, Jim Ross, that sort of showed me the ropes. Howard Finkel, I loved.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, these guys were just all of these guys who, you know, I had certainly was familiar with, that take the time to say, hey, kid, come here. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. And I loved it. So there were, I don't know if there was one specific person who, you know, reached out, but I think as a family, they sort of took me in.
Yeah.
An outsider, really, you know, as somebody who'd never done it before on that level or scale, and was very, very welcoming. So I appreciated that.
And I guess that's quite rare because, as you say, you weren't the biggest fan. You didn't know loads about their industry.
Right.
So it's amazing that they took you in.
They really did. And everyone was so kind. You know, there were, you know, I'm sure there were a story here or there that of someone who wasn't, but that's in any business.
Yeah,
predominantly, my memories are all very, very positive.
And so your week to week kind of schedule for WWE, you say you're balancing the radio show as well,
right? So
going from here to Stamford a lot, I guess.
Yeah,
all the time.
A day for me in the WWF life would probably be I get up at 2:30, 2:45 in the morning. I come in. I'm in New York City by 4 o'clock. We do the radio show. I'm out of here at 10 o'clock in a town car waiting for me to take me to Stamford. It's about an hour drive. We go to Stamford and we either do Mania or Superstars or a Challenge, or there's a segment taping for Raw. I was happy to say I was on the first Raw, which was very, very cool. But yeah, and I would be there for 4 or 5 hours and then get back in the town car and head back to my home in New Jersey. When I started, I was living in Manhattan, so the car would come back. But I was there almost 6 years. And I think that the reason I stopped was because I used all of my vacation time at the radio station to travel to pay-per-views.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a vacation in about 6 years.
Wow.
So, you know, there's a lot of stories. Why did you go? Did you get fired? No. I left on great terms. Everything was fantastic. I still talk to those guys. But the day-to-day was great. I mean, we had a great time. You go into makeup, you do your show, you know, you knock out packages. Sometimes there'd be more, sometimes there'd be less. You do your voiceovers, and then back in the car, and I'd come back and do it again. Probably 2 or 3 times a week. And keep in mind, some of those shows were live. So on Saturday morning or Sunday morning, when we did the live shows, it was the same drill, only I didn't have to do the radio show first.
Wow. So full-on life here.
Yeah.
And just talk to me briefly about the first Raw. Were you in a pre-tape segment on that, or was it...
No, I was there. I was at the Manhattan Center.
It was just around the corner from you, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was right here.
Wow.
So I was there live, and nobody knew what to expect. Everybody was like, what's he doing? Monday Night Raw. This is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And for me, you know, I was like, I have to do my radio show the next day, so I better sleep a little during the day, but there was no sleeping because you had all this nervous energy, and you were doing it, and you were going live. But, yeah, Manhattan Center, right around the block, first Raw. I don't remember what I did. I think I did an interview package somewhere, but it was live.
Yeah.
And really exciting.
Wow. And It was a funny time for WWF when you were there, because I guess from a business standpoint, they hadn't quite hit their strides and the Attitude Era hadn't quite come in. Mm-hmm. I guess you had the likes of Shawn and Bret and Steve Austin coming into his own, but not quite there yet. I mean, how was, say, Vince to work with at that time? Because I imagine he was under enormous pressure, WCW kind of breathing down their throats week in, week out. He
never showed it if he was.
Oh, really?
Vince was always the same, always kind, always welcoming, always the first guy to crack a joke. I always thought that he never took himself too seriously. If he was performing, it was a different thing.
Yeah.
But the day-to-day, human-to-human contact was just so genuine and so real that, if you hear stories about Vince that say he's not a good guy, they're just not true. From my perspective, it was just fantastic. He was, like I said, very genuine, very welcoming. If I ever had a question, he was sure to say, hey, ask. Don't worry about it. There's no stupid question. So he was amazing to work with.
And do you think he sort of really respected you coming from a mainstream radio background? Because you always get the sense that he wants to work with people who are in the wider entertainment industry.
I think so. I think he got that I knew the business and understood the business. But one of the things that I think I'll never forget from Vince is he always used to say, listen, television is movement. We got to move. We got to move. We got to move. Constantly be moving. Change your angles. Do different things. And television is movement. And if you watch any of the really good production, and in my mind, WWE's production is unparalleled.
It's off the charts. It's amazing.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And that's because of Vince. I mean, he hires great people, but it starts there.
Yeah.
And it really is unparalleled.
So you mentioned before you had some pretty colourful characters as co-hosts. Sometimes you mentioned you worked with Macho Man Randy Savage.
Doc Hendricks was another one.
Doc Hendricks.
Yep. Yeah.
What a legend. Sonny also, I believe you did some work with. What was she like to work with?
Sonny was great. I mean, very self-deprecating, very entertaining, friendly. I think she was involved with one of the wrestlers at the time.
Chris Candido.
I think so.
Yeah.
But she was great. I mean, we had a lot of laughs. We did a couple of shows together, as a matter of fact. But just a terrific person. Can
you shed any light on the rumors of her and HBK?
At that time, there really wasn't anything that I knew of. That I certainly didn't hear of anything.
Okay.
But maybe not being there full time, in the office and hearing that kind of stuff. Because I was just sort of did my taping and shot back to Manhattan.
Yeah. So what are your sort of favorite memories of your time with WWF? What's your best night on the job, worst night on the job? Any specific pay-per-views that stick out to you?
Well, the first one, I think, as we said, WrestleMania 9 at Caesar's Palace. I mean,
unforgettable.
It's so hard to beat. The In Your House broadcasts, to me, were awesome. Stephanie Wyand, who I did some of those with later on, where we actually gave away a house.
Yeah.
And pretty cool. Things like that were very, very memorable. I don't have any negative memories. I think the only thing I could say is one time I got yelled at by Razor Ramon because I had my hair long and I had some stubble, and he goes, "Hey, Chico, somebody's already got that gig." I was like, "Yes, sir."
Quickly shave it off immediately.
Exactly. Yeah. So no real problem there. But I think one of the things that happened for me is while I was working there, as sometimes happens in your life, you go through a little weight gain, and I got kind of fat while I was on camera.
I don't remember you being fat.
I was heavy. Yeah, at one point, and I had the really bad 90s mullet. Do you remember that?
I certainly remember that, yeah.
It was classic. It's one of those great mullets. But looking back at it, I'm going, what were you thinking? Why would you do that? But I did it.
Well, I posted the Instagram picture of you with the mullet, and you commented saying, I'm never going to live that look down.
Right?
I think you should grow it back.
No. It's not coming back.
Maybe it wouldn't work.
It wouldn't.
One event, I mean, all the In Your House stuff I found really interesting because suddenly they were just throwing pay-per-views at people. It became once a month.
Right.
It was a really, they were 2-hour shows, weren't they, in between all the big five, I guess, at that point.
Yep.
So a lot of demands from you, I guess, as a broadcaster. But one event that sticks in my mind was Survivor Series 96 from Madison Square Garden, just downstairs. Steve Austin, Bret Hart. Yeah. It was an incredible card of action. I loved it so much. But I loved your interviews backstage you did that night because you put so much importance to the match. You interviewed both Brett and Steve backstage before their match, and I just thought you did an incredible job.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you.
You made them feel so important and must see.
And it was, at that time, remember too, you're driving the business end of it.
Yeah.
You're trying to get pay-per-view buys, and but if I don't take it seriously and I don't see the impact of a match like that, then who will, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's our sport. That's, sports entertainment. And that's what people want to see. So if you're not into it as an announcer, there's nothing worse than watching somebody who's sort of half-hearted. I had a great time. I did the pay-per-view countdown shows on the TV Guide channel, and I could, get in the ring and get the crowd going. It was as much as an adrenaline pump for me as them.
Yeah.
To have 50,000 people on their feet screaming and the camera showing it and the lights and the explosions going off. I mean, if you don't feel that and those matches, which were so big, I was fanning out at that time. I was fanboying out because I was so into it.
Yeah.
You do become a fan really quickly when you're immersed in it and you get to know these guys and see them. So it was a great night.
Well, I guess as we were saying before we started recording, maybe you weren't a fan before you started, but when you get in that world, you see what these guys and girls do day in, day out.
Definitely.
I mean, the toll it takes on their body, the schedule, the travel. It's amazing what these guys do.
My favorite thing is when people say, well, wrestling is fake. Yeah. And I want to say, have you ever been to a match?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen a match? I wouldn't get in the ring. I mean, these guys are in top condition, peak physical form, and it is a sport. I mean, these guys are conditioning. They're in the gym. And as you said, the travel schedule is grueling.
Yeah.
I mean, at some points, they were doing almost 300 shows a year. Can you imagine? I mean, that's insane.
Yeah. And what was I going to ask next? When you left, what was your last event? Was it 97?
97. Yeah, was it in your house at that? Maybe it was SummerSlam.
I read that it was SummerSlam.
I think it was SummerSlam 97. Yeah.
Okay, so that was a big one.
It's funny, to go back and think 97.
Wow.
I mean, that's a long time. I don't even believe you know my name. From 1997, right? I mean, it's a long time ago.
I'm a big fan. Followed you for years. So that was I believe Undertaker, Bret Hart in the main event. But so and then Survivor Series 97, we had the Montreal screw job, all that went down, and the industry really, really changed around that time. The Attitude Era kicked in. Vince McMahon sort of revealed himself as the owner of the company, which many fans weren't aware of. Did you sort of regret leaving at a time when it then sort of massively took off into the mainstream?
I think with anything else, it's very cyclical, the business. It has an ebb and a flow, and I was sort of there in an ebb period, but I didn't feel like it was, So when I saw it move in that direction, part of me said, man, I would have had a great time doing this kind of stuff. And then part of me said, well, maybe for the radio show, that wasn't exactly the image because it got pretty heated.
That's
for
true.
Quite
so you
a while.
had your image to sort of protect as well at the time.
One of the big things, and I don't think I've ever talked about this either, was in my contract, because a lot of those guys would like to touch you. A lot of, pick you up, point. I remember the late, great Owen Hart one time picked me up. And I had to have a talk with Vince, and I said, look, I can't do this. There's no touching. And if you ever look down the road, you don't see a lot of announcers. It used to be they get picked up, and poor Mean Gene used to get picked up, and but that all changed. I was worried about that because man, these guys could take you out.
Yeah,
that'd be it. So that was one of the things I think that evolved. So getting back to your question, I think it was a double-edged sword for me because I said, man, this would have been a blast. This would have been fun. But it got, for a while, I think it went kind of up to the line and maybe over it, but that's where entertainment was going in the country.
Yeah, exactly.
It was a mirror of the country.
Yeah. And so do you miss it? You talked just previously about the experience of being in front of the live crowd, that adrenaline rush of being in the ring, doing live TV. Do you miss your WWE days?
I do. Yeah, it was a blast. There's nothing like it, performing in front of a live crowd like that. And I will tell you that wrestling fans are unlike any other fans that I know. They're so loyal, and they still remember. The fact that we're doing this interview is really a tribute to the business because there aren't many businesses where you could go back to a guy who stopped doing that job in 1997, almost 20 years ago, right? 18 years, and still want to hear what that guy had to say.
Yeah.
But that's because wrestling fans, I still get it on social media for the radio station. When I go out, I remember you from wrestling.
Yeah.
You know, those fans are so loyal. And some of them loyal because they hated me, you know, and that goofball and that weirdo, and he was terrible. But listen, love is love, whether it's in the form of, of an insult or what. At least they remember, right?
Yeah. I mean, you know, the reason this is happening is because we had requests into the show from our listeners saying, can you get Todd on the show? I was like, I'm going to try.
That's funny.
So, you know, it's awesome.
Maybe some people who want to say, get that goofball on the show and see what the heck he's doing now.
And so you recently went back. You went back up Stanford to the TV studios. You did some stuff for the Best of In Your House DVD and Blu-ray, which is available now, and I strongly suggest people should buy it.
Yes, me too.
How was your time back at WWF?
Like I'd never left?
WWE, rather.
That's right.
Yeah.
Like I never left. It really was. I saw, you know, some camera guys at a John McCall. You know, I saw the same Jill, my makeup artist. Some of the producers were the same. It was like old home week. It really was. And there were some new folks there too, who we sort of just. One of the camera guys said one of my deals was because I was in radio. They used to call me One Take Todd. So I just give me the points. All right, let's do it. Boom, knock it out. And they'd always say, "Well, you want to do it again?" I'm like, "No, we did it. We killed it. Come on, let's go." So one of the cameramen remembered. He said, "Oh, this is going to be a fast day. You got One Take Todd." So we run through them, and I said, "Well, let's do it again for a safety," because I didn't want it to end at that point.
Oh.
You know, because when you're doing that volume of content, you know, you want to make sure it's good, but you want it to feel natural.
Yeah.
So I think if it's so rehearsed, sometimes it comes off that way. So I'd like to just give me the points, let me know what I have to hit, and then let's just do it. And if I make a mistake, well, guess what? I make a mistake and we keep rolling. But I always used to pride myself in trying to knock that stuff right out.
Yeah.
But it was great. I loved it. It was great seeing everybody again. I didn't get to see any of the guys, obviously, because I was in a studio with their cardboard cutouts.
Yeah.
But it was still a great time.
And you've just reminded me about something I wanted to ask you about. You talking about the volume of content you used to do. Back in this kind of new generation era when you were around, they were trying lots of new things. They did this live show, Livewire, I believe it was called, where fans would phone in. A lot of controversial things went on that show. Vince Russo was involved and the like. How was that experience? And was that broadcast from the studios in Stanford?
It was in Stanford, and they have a brand new facility. They have a brand new facility now, but back then it was all done out of the little sort of control studio in Stanford.
Okay.
Now they have a massive sprawling
Yeah.
place, but yeah, we were in little different rooms with backdrops, and the phones were always interesting because you never knew, man. And people would call up and swear, and you'd have to dump it. You know, you'd have to make it. But live is always the best, and I think that's why I love that kind of a show. Because for the most part, I mean, 98% of the calls were positive and good, but you'd always get some wacko, you know, who'd call up and say something, and those were a lot of fun. But it was an interesting show to do live, especially to produce, you know, because the producers and directors really had to be on their game because, you know, you had to hit commercials and you had to hit promo packages live, as we used to call it, and there was couldn't screw it up.
Am I right in saying Eric Bischoff called in the show one week? And Paul Heyman perhaps as well?
Yep.
Must have been a fun show.
Classic.
And with your radio
television
background, I guess that, you know, is a perfect
and you just roll
show
with it.
You
know, what are you going to do?
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you about, what was I going to say? Oh, yeah, talking about Eric Bischoff. Was there ever any options to go down to WCW? Was that ever in your sights? Did you ever think about it?
No, I really didn't, because you got to remember, for me, radio was still my full-time job, and Vince was a guy who called me.
Yeah.
And you know, for loyalty, I would have never done that.
Okay.
Just because he gave me a shot and, you know, gave me a break, and if I wasn't going to do it there, I wasn't going to do it.
Yeah. Favorite WWF superstar of all time?
Oh, man. That's tough.
And I guess it must be difficult for you because you kind of knew them all personally. I guess you would like certain people for different reasons. You know, it's different than just being a fan watching at home.
Who was active when I was there?
Yeah.
Boy. It's a really tough question. I don't think I've ever been asked that either. They always ask least favorite.
Henry Godwin.
He was good.
He just popped into my head. Okay, who's your least favorite then?
Again. The only guy I had... Razor was the only guy I had ever had a thing with, but it wasn't my least favorite.
Yeah.
British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith and I were never the best of friends, but again, nice guy. I don't know. Taker was great. Kevin, I don't know whether to use their real names or.
Yeah, I think in this day and age, real names is probably better.
But I'm a big kayfabe guy on that.
Are you? Are you kind of old school in that respect?
I really am in that respect. Like, I never, even with Hulk Hogan, it was always Hulk.
Yeah.
You didn't call him Terry. Because what if you slipped when you were on camera?
Yeah, that's true.
I always stayed in character. I even to this day, like when you say names, I'm thinking, God, should I say their name? Should I? I know it's changed a lot, but when I was in it, it was Yokozuna.
Yeah,
you didn't say Rodney.
Yeah.
You didn't use their names.
I love that you're old school like that.
Even backstage, I never did that because you would be afraid that when you were on camera, all of a sudden you'd say, "Well, Terry, you're taking." My God, it's Hulk Hogan. I can't call him Terry.
So I guess that puts a sort of spotlight on how the industry has changed so much, and people know everything that's going on backstage, or they think they do. Do you think it's a shame that it's gone that far?
I do.
Because there's no going back now, I guess.
Being old school, I do.
Yeah.
I loved the mystery and the sort of some things were kept secret, and these were characters. And you loved your favorite character, your baby face and your heel, and even saying that, I'm like, nobody ever knew that's what we called him. It wasn't a baby face and a heel.
Yeah.
It was a good guy and a bad guy.
Yeah.
So you couldn't slip. But yeah, I think it's taken some of the mystery out. But listen, our society is like that everywhere.
Yeah.
With reality television now, nothing's secret anymore. Even if you want it to be. And most people don't even want their secrets to be secret because it helps put fannies in the seats or it helps sell product or whatever they're doing. But I do think it's in my mind a bit of a departure from where I thought it was fun and cool and some mystery still involved.
So that leads me to the big question. Would you... And will there ever be an option for you to go back to WWE?
Oh, I think I'm far too old for that at this point, don't you?
I don't think you are. Well, Michael Cole, he's presumably similar age to you.
That's a quick Michael Cole story. His real name is Sean Cothard.
Okay.
I don't know if that was known. But he used to be my news guy on the radio in Albany. And Sean was Michael was a massive fan of wrestling and worked for a CBS radio station. And when I was leaving, they said, "Do you know of anybody?" And I said, "Yeah, this guy would be great. He's a huge fan." So I actually brought him
so you brought Cole
to Stamford. Yeah.
Wow.
And that's how he started there. I'd known him for years.
Because he was effectively your replacement, really, wasn't he? Yeah.
Yeah. And I basically brought them my replacement because that's how good the relationship was. There was no adversarial relationship when I left, and I brought him up, and he was a huge fan forever. So he knew a lot more about it than, frankly, I did. So he was just a perfect fit for them, and I'm just so happy for him. And he's done it for so long. I often thought it'd be fun to go back and to do it again, and to and maybe they'll invite me for some sort of where are they now or
well, they do the old school Raws,
right?
Like say once a year they seem to bring in a lot of old guys, and
I was invited to one and then disinvited for some reason.
Oh, okay.
I don't remember why. It was a scheduling thing. It was nothing personal. It was like, oh, come to this, and no, don't come to this. It's like, I'll try not to take that personally, but okay. I think it was a part on my fault as well, part on my side, because there was some sort of scheduling glitch. But listen, it would be fun. I don't know how much I could contribute or make people watch or be interested anymore, but it would be fun.
And I mean, so just sort of fantasy booking on my part. If they did give you the call and say, "Come back full time, we want you on the road. We want you being one of our main hosts with Renee Young." Say, I mean, would you consider sort of a full-time gig there?
Well, if you're negotiating the deal, you'll negotiate the salary, right? So
yeah,
I mean, for the right money, I say no to nothing. You know what I mean? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
I will sort that out for you.
Because that's a whole different lifestyle change now. It's pretty
is.
comfortable. I got the commute into New York City. I'm here. I do my 4. I hit the door. I'm out. I'm doing my thing. I have small little production company, so I do some TV work on the side. But, full time, I don't know. I've never done it full time. Ever.
No, I guess not.
I've always been in the part-time situation, even though we had monthly pay-per-views, the In Your House when I was doing that. So, I think at this point in my life, it would be kind of grueling. But would I go back to do a studio show for it? Yeah, why not? It was a blast. But, again, I think my time has passed.
Well, I don't think it has, Todd, and I'm going to make it happen. Listen, I really, really, really hugely appreciate you taking the time to talk to me this morning.
This was fun. You're the greatest. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Todd Pettengill, thank you very much.
Thank you.